Hey guys, Trevor Hold here. Welcome to another episode of the Who Are We podcast. I got Melitta Campbell here with me. How are you going today?
Great, thanks. And you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Just before we get going, I just do a disclosure. We're just recording this episode and see how it works out, and might publish it on YouTube and put some promotional stuff on LinkedIn or whatever, just to raise awareness about identity and see if we can get people thinking about who might get straight into it. Who is Melitta Campbell and what does she stand for?
Yeah, it's always such a interesting but difficult question to answer, isn't it? Because you think, well, I'm just little old me. But today I help women to really communicate their value and communicate that to their clients so that they can have more impact in the world and feel more confident building their business and really creating something meaningful, because that's what I feel most people, when they start a business or start something or a project of their own, they just want that to generate some meaning for other people usually. But what I discovered is that the big problem holding people back is that we're never taught to really find that value in ourselves and communicate that and talk about it, not in ways that are braggy, but in ways that people understand how they can work with us or collaborate with us to use our purpose and our skills and our experience to create something wonderful in the world. So it's really rewarding, and getting here has been quite the journey. I'm living in Switzerland now, but originally I'm from the UK, and followed my path, and through my career I really focused on marketing and communications, and then later in my career I started coaching leaders on their communications, and I established a women's network as well, and that's the point where I realized that understanding how to communicate and create connection with other people and lean into your value and all of this was really holding a lot of people back. And I think with the rise of social media, it's become even harder, because it's so much easier to compare yourself to people around the world who you don't know who they are or how they got to where they are, and you just instantly think, oh my gosh, Trevor's so much more amazing than I could ever be. And it's rarely the case. We're just all amazing and valuable in different ways. So so that's me in a nutshell.
That's amazing. So I found communications is key, and you try to help other people, empower women in particular, to have the communication skills. Is it self-advocate who they are to other people so you can better utilize their skills? Is that summing up a bit quickly?
Yeah, exactly. And I've always been quite shy and introverted. A couple of years ago, I released the book, A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking. And so I've never been someone that has been able to communicate my value by being really loud and in people's faces. So my approach to that is perhaps a little bit more subtle. It's all about creating the meaning and connection and being people's champion, already being there in their world, showing up and adding value and taking people on a journey towards joining your business or becoming a partner in some way, if that's relevant. But along the way, even if people don't become a client or don't collaborate in some way, then you've always left the right impression. You're always building that brand in other people's minds, so you build that credibility and respect. And I think if you show up in that way, you're never going to do any harm, and you can possibly do a lot of good in the process. And I think that always sits well with our hearts. So it's a different way of thinking about things sometimes. And from my community, I know I attract a lot of people like me who are quieter personalities, and so being loud and brash just doesn't fit. And yet a lot of people that we see out there in the internet appear to be very loud and confident, which can make us feel even worse about our own abilities. And so it's nice to be the kind of anti-voice to that.
Yeah, And it's interesting that you should say that, because I'm quite out there, I suppose, because my partner's a bit quiet and subdued and that, and doesn't like to be in the spotlight, where I've been a bit opposite, I suppose, louder, and often we talk about different outcomes. For example, she goes to a mechanic and they might rip her off $50 more than what they would if I do it, just because probably, I don't know, whether it's because she's a woman or whether her demeanor is a bit softer than mine, or what it is. But we often get that conversation happening about different outcomes that we can achieve just with being brash or quiet. You know, it's quite a science in that, is it?
Yeah, but I think it comes from inner confidence and that trust in ourselves and our own instincts. And on my podcast, I've interviewed now around 150 successful women in business about what it takes to succeed, what their journey has been like. And it's been really interesting that the number one piece of advice, or the number one thing they've learned that has helped them to succeed, is to trust their own instincts. And I think when we have that inner trust in ourselves and our abilities, and we recognize those, then we may be quiet, but we're not going to be a pushover, you know. And I think we can have a lot of impact that way. And being quieter, I think it needs to both types of personality in the world, but and I don't think being an introvert or being quiet has anything to do with your confidence or your ability to create an impact. It's just different roads to do that, and different ways that feel natural, and different ways that work for our personality and feel good. So I think it's nice. But the killer, as I said earlier, is to compare yourself to anyone else, because we're not like anyone else, but that doesn't mean we're anything less than anyone else.
Yeah, that I found in my journey was managing expectations and setting boundaries. Like from a project point of view, management or your clients are saying, oh, we've got to have this at this date or something. It might be unrealistic, or you might have to put your family on hold for that time to try and meet that unrealistic deadline, and you try and because I had a problem with saying no and not being able to create the boundaries. And I expect, if you're a quieter person, do you feel that communication is harder when it comes to setting boundaries for yourself?
I'm not sure boundaries is linked to communication. I see boundaries as being very much linked to self-love and self-respect, because when you have that self-respect for yourself, and you want to do well for your family, and you want to do well for your clients or in business, and to meet expectation, but you have more understanding of what it would take to achieve that. So I know when I was a consultant, when I first started my business, I was working with some of the biggest companies and leaders in the world. And as you say, they would say, oh yes, we need this by tomorrow. And he's like, okay, that's great. I'm really looking forward to this project. I can have it done for you by Tuesday, because I know the usual quality that you expect when you call me, and I'm not going to rush this. And so they're like, okay, Tuesday is fine. Every single time, without fail, they always want it yesterday. But when you push back and you don't say no, but you say, to get this done to the quality that I know that you want, and I'm not willing to compromise on this, it will be this date. How's that for you? And I think people respect and understand that to do a good job, you need some time. So, and again, I think that comes from knowing yourself, respecting what you need, the environment and the conditions and the tools that you need to do a good job and feel great about your work. So I think, and again, anytime that we've compromised, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but we always regret it. We always at the end think, why did I say yes to that? And you're disappointed in yourself, because you could have done better if you just pushed back a little bit and had that conversation. So I think it's not, we need to communicate that, but really starting from what that love and respect, and having that self-compassion for ourselves as well. And as you say, there will be some times when we have to make sacrifices, but I always tell my clients, make sure that a sacrifice you make, like sacrificing time with your family, is for something better. You're not sacrificing it because you feel you should or you're expected to, But if it's working towards something better, working towards something you're going to feel really proud of, then go for it. But yeah, I think it always comes back to that having some of that self-respect, regardless of your personality type. And then you set those boundaries. You can set boundaries, but they won't stick if you don't have that first.
Yeah. So just understanding, I suppose, when it comes to that, the values. So you've got to obviously value the time with your families first, and understanding that they are an important role in your life, and your friends and your social network and your sporting team or whatever it is, and just understanding that does mean something to you, and to be able to push back, like you say, like I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
No. I was fortunate to, I used to work in banking, and I remember one of the senior leaders in the bank, and I really respected this guy because once we were in a meeting and someone burst in and said, but this is really important. And he said, I agree, this is really important. However, personally, I never work at the weekends because that's my family time. I never ask or expect anyone else in this company to work at weekends. If we do this, that's what's required, and I'm not going to compromise on that. And he said, go back, tell them it will be done on this date. And maybe that's where I learned that kind of that you can say this. And they were like, okay, and it happened. I think sometimes we think we have to do things a certain way, and there's no option. But when we kind of push back, it's like, well, that's great, but it works. Most people respect people's boundaries, I think, when you explain them.
But yeah, I that was my biggest drama that I had. I remember a project, and I did 2 36-hour shifts on this specific project at different times in the schedule to try and get the schedule done. And I think it's probably 15 years ago now, and because it was so urgent, because I had to build all this stuff, and they still haven't built it to this date. You know what I mean? Like, it just didn't eventuate past the design stage, but it was so urgent. And when you look back at it, and I remember my partner just had my youngest son, and and she probably needed me more to look after, be there with her and the child than the project. But for me, it was like a chest bashing thing. I'm a project man. Look at me. This is me. I'm a project man, but really you're just been a dickhead and being used, I suppose. And because I failed to set my boundaries and say no, because I just felt you just say yes because that's what the project needs of you. But really, if, like you say, if you do push back, it doesn't really need that. So it's interesting that you should say that. I needed you. Yep.
Yeah, I think in those moments, as I said, you identified with being a project man, someone that does an amazing job, one of the only people that could turn this around, and you wanted to do that good job as you thought what it needed. So in that, we can always do better when we understand better. But in that moment, I'm convinced that there's no way you thought, oh, I'm gonna do bad by my wife so that I can do this. That wasn't the thinking process at all. So I think when we do learn to do better, we do kind of understand our value and our boundaries and that kind of thing, it's very easy to go back to moments like that and start and beat yourself up about it. Oh, I was so stupid back then, but you were doing, we're always doing what we think is the best with the tools we have available. So it's just to go back and think, well, wasn't that fascinating? And then look at how did you feel now looking back at that, and you realize, okay, this is going to help me keep my boundaries more fixed in the future because I've seen what happens. But that urgent project years later still isn't even done. So there's a big lesson there that urgent really rarely is urgent.
Urgent, that's right. Yeah. And now what about I'm curious because just because of your experience, obviously, but from my experience in some of these projects and some of these things I've worked on, there's often aggression and conflict in between trades and in between different contractors or even space on some construction site, like fighting for where to run the lines or whatever, because different scenarios. But was there much conflict in some of these projects, and how did you manage that from a quiet point of view? Because it did get quite loud trying to manage all that stuff,
Yeah, I remember one of my first jobs, I worked for a company that did contract furnishing. So they would go into a block of flats and furnish the whole lot. So we had sales guys who were from the sort of had a real estate property background, and they would have actual fights in the office. It was just like awful. It's like not an environment that I recommend at all. But I think there's a lot of insecurity in these situations, and if you can't go into that situation with any kind of emotion, because that just fuels the fire. So the best thing is just to let it settle and come back with some facts and information, and not go into anything emotional, because that just makes these people who are insecure in that way worse, for sure. So I'm not an expert in handling difficult conversations, but it's what I've learned from my kids in this situation is walk away from the situation, and then when they've calmed down, come back in and have a decent conversation about, I really didn't appreciate that. I think we can do better, and then have a sensible, calm conversation. But yeah, it's thankfully it's not really a situation that I've been in very often. So.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I was just curious about that, because it is something that when I was doing it, that some of them conversations did get quite heated, I suppose. But no, that's amazing. So your clients, like, to go through some of this stuff that you're going through, and helping them understand who they are, and how to communicate, and that, is that an ongoing process, or is there a time frame or a course, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the way I currently work with my clients, it's a 12-month process. The actual process is only 12 weeks long, or it can be, but some people take a bit longer because, well, they have families and other things going on as well. But also, if they've never thought about their values before, for example, or who their ideal client is, or how they can serve people in a way that is meaningful, in a way that only they could deliver, this takes a lot of thinking. So very often the 12 weeks actually becomes more like 16 or 20 weeks. And why I make work with clients over a 12-month period is because once they have that foundation, once they understand their value and they start to bring that into their work more, then they have questions, because opportunities start to come. They get more clients in, they have mindset challenges come up that, oh, now I have to get in front of people. What does that look like? And so then we work on how to make sure that they can do this on a consistent basis and feel great about it and confident as well. So it's fun, because it's really my version of marketing. I call it value whispering. But I never quite know where people are going to get to by the end of it, because we take such a personal approach to how they're going to bring their unique brand of value into the world. So where we get to by the end of the 12 months, it's usually a slightly different place and a more exciting place than we imagined when we first had that initial conversation. So yeah, I've been doing this now for 7 years, and it still feels so exciting. Fresh. When I was doing my communication consultancy, which I ran for 8 years before that, it was the same stuff all the time, and I wasn't really feeling like I was making a big contribution through the work I was doing. Yes, things were happening and it was tick box and I got paid well, but I burned out of that process, because I realized I wasn't living into my value. And then I started to see this is the space I should be in. So so it's definitely a journey. And I think we like to think that understanding our business and our clients and developing a business is a nice, straightforward, logical line, but it's actually a bit loopy. You discover one thing and then you realize, oh, this is now this part a few steps behind makes more sense, and then you kind of go forward and keep looping back and strengthening your understanding and processes as you go. So that's why I make the program longer, to support people through all of the loops as they build their business.
Yeah, so have you got any final words or something you want to share before we go?
I think as I said, the biggest thing that I've learned, and it's been reinforced by all the conversations I've had with many other business owners, women and men, is just trust your instincts. And through all the work I do with my clients, I never really have to give them anything that they don't have already. We have everything we need within us. I don't think we can have our visions of how we want to work in the world if we don't have all the tools already. It's just looking inside a little bit more to find that value, find that self-love and compassion, which is going to be key in helping us really make an impact in the world, I think. So yeah, I would just say trust yourself and go for it. Whatever it is.
And thanks for spending the time and sharing it. You sound like you're doing amazing work there, and hopefully in the future we can catch up and have a bit further elaboration on it all.
I'd love that. Thanks, Trevor. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Have a good evening. See ya. Bye.
You too.